A 12-year-old girl disappeared and no one noticed for more than a year. Jacqueline Torres-Garcia's remains were discovered this month inside a plastic bin behind an abandoned home in New Britain, Connecticut, and police believe she has been dead since the fall of 2024. And now, newly unsealed warrants, they are revealing that her mother, Karla Garcia, admitted to starving her daughter in the weeks before she died and even had another child impersonate Jacqueline during a DCF video call after she was already gone. We are going to be breaking down the latest developments in this disturbing case with a family law attorney. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. How does a 12-year-old girl vanish from her community and no one notices for more than a year? That's the allegation. That's what we're talking about right now. Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia's story has horrified Connecticut, and it has left people asking how every system meant to protect her seemingly failed. Her remains were found earlier this month in a plastic bin behind an abandoned home in New Britain. Police believe she possibly died nearly a year ago in the fall of 2024. Her mother, Karla Garcia, and Garcia's boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita, are now charged with her murder. Garcia's sister, Jacqueline, faces charges of child cruelty and unlawful restraint for her alleged role in all of this. But what has newly come to light makes this case even more disturbing, because according to newly unsealed warrants, Garcia apparently admitted that she stopped feeding her daughter in the weeks before she died. Family court records show relatives had fought bitterly over custody of Jacqueline, and DCF now says that Garcia went so far as to have another girl seemingly pretend to be Jacqueline during a video call with caseworkers after the child was apparently already dead. Now, we're going to get to all of that in a moment. The new warrants, the shocking admissions, what investigators now say really happened, but first we got to break this down. This is Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia. Friends, family, they called her Mimi. She attended kindergarten through 5th grade in the New Britain School District until August 26, 2024. That's when, instead of starting 6th grade, her mother, Karla Garcia, who we've been talking about, filed paperwork to withdraw her from school, telling the district that she planned to homeschool her daughter instead. Police now believe that around this time, Jacqueline was being abused and malnourished inside the family's Farmington apartment. Detectives say the abuse continued through the fall of 2024, which is when police believe she died. Now, the motive behind killing her, that may not be clear, but what we do know is that rather than report her death, police say, they allege, that Garcia instead kept her daughter's body hidden in the basement of that home. And in March of 2025, when the family moved to New Britain, investigators believe they brought the remains with them. So now months go by, no one sees this little girl, no one sees Jacqueline, no one reports her missing. Her paternal grandmother, Patricia Delgado, told NBC Connecticut in Spanish that she hadn't seen her granddaughter in months. But whenever she asked, she says she was always refused. Then came October 8th. At around midday, someone calls 911 to report some suspicious behavior, including a large plastic storage bin that is behind this abandoned property on Clark Street in New Britain. When officers arrive, they open the bin and they found human remains inside. And police would confirm that those remains belonged to Jacqueline. October 12th, police arrest Karla Garcia and her sister, so this is Jacqueline's aunt, Jacqueline Garcia. At a press conference, New Britain Mayor Aaron Stewart said this.
As a mother, this makes me sick to my stomach to be standing here today with what we're about to tell you. On Wednesday, October 8th, when a report of suspicious activity at 80 Clark Street in New Britain came in from an anonymous caller requesting police, responding officers had no idea what they would be walking into. This caller reported suspicious activity at a known abandoned house in their neighborhood. This house had been vacant for over 2 years, and it was owned and is owned by an out-of-state landlord from New York. None of those determined to be involved with this case have ever resided at this property. I want to thank the initial caller for speaking up, for having the courage to say something. Without that initial call, no one can say for certain where we would be at this point in time.
Police called this case heartbreaking and disturbing.
35 years, this is probably one of the worst cases that we've had to, I think the facts that you have, that she probably died a long time ago, and was stowed away is probably enough to show you what we are dealing with here. So yes, no, very, very difficult on everybody handling these cases.
Now, at that point, investigators were still searching for Garcia's boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita. He was arrested on October 13th. Cameras captured him being led from the station, his face bruised, as officers placed him in a cruiser. Now, all three suspects appeared before a judge on October 14th. This was their first court appearance since the arrests. Jacqueline's mother, Karla Garcia, was charged with murder with special circumstances, conspiracy to commit murder, improper disposal of a body, tampering with physical evidence, unlawful restraint, intentional cruelty to a child under 19, and risk of injury to a child. Her bond was set at $5 million. Her sister, Jacqueline, was charged with intentional cruelty to a child under 19, risk of injury, first-degree unlawful restraint. Her bond was set at $1 million. And Anita is charged with murder with a special circumstance, conspiracy to commit murder, risk of injury to a child, unlawful restraint, intentional cruelty to a child. He's being held also on a $5 million bond. Now, obviously, this is a story that we wanted to bring to you, and the reason that we can cover something like this is not only because of the amazing support that we get from all of you out there, but also from our incredible sponsor, Upside. This is the free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas, groceries, food. So I pump my gas, I can use Upside. I go out to lunch, I can use Upside. I get something from a convenience store, I can use Upside. And why wouldn't I want to get cash back when I do all these things, right? This is actual, real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you transfer right into your bank account. So once you have the free Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app. You get paid. To find out how much you can earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. But make sure to use our promo code Sidebar because you get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Now, what's already public is painting a pretty chilling picture, right? But I will tell you, it is only getting darker because we are learning new details from three different fronts. You have DCF's own records, newly unsealed police warrants, and family court files, and each one adds another layer to how all of this unfolded, how this tragedy unfolded. So to help us break all this down, I want to bring on a special guest. I'm joined by family law attorney Randy Kessler. Randy, thanks so much for coming back here on Sidebar. Really appreciate it.
Always great to be with you, Jesse.
How does a case like Jacqueline, Mimi, Torres-Garcia's, how does this happen in a modern system? How could a 12-year-old, 11-year-old disappear for nearly a year with, I guess the question is, nobody noticing, without detection?
Yeah, I'm so glad you're covering this story. Shine some light on it. Now, you know, these social workers and people that work for the Departments of Family and Children's Services across the country, they're always overworked, they're always underpaid, and things slip through the cracks, right? We don't think about it until we hear something like this, but we need to keep shining a light on this. It should have been caught. We as a government, we as a people, we as a civilization need to protect the most innocent. That's the term in Latin, parens patriae. The state acts as pseudo-parents to take care of children, and this one fell through the cracks. There were warning signs everywhere. Somebody should have caught it.
Well, more specifically, legally, what do agencies like the Department of Children and Families, DCF, what do they play in protecting children? What are their limitations? Where do the systems fail?
So there are a lot of times when I say they have no limitations, and they should have more limitations because they are enormously powerful. It's very hard if you're a legislator in a state to vote against giving child protective services all the power they need, right? Their job is to protect children. So there are a lot of laws on the books that let them go in. You know, if I'm trying to get custody for my client, I have to file a lawsuit, you know, I have to go to court, I have to get an order. They have administrative powers where they can go right in on suspicion and say, first things first, let's protect the children, then we'll investigate and figure it out. There are a lot of good laws on the books, so it's not a matter likely of the law being there for them to use. It's a matter of them having the time to research it and figure out which case should we use this law on. This is one, they should have used all the powers. I cannot imagine they didn't have the power to go in and protect this child before this tragedy happened.
And this aspect of custody battles, right? How common is it for family disputes, custody battles, where it escalates to the point that a child is at risk? Obviously, children are affected, but where a child is at risk, that there are warning signs for attorneys or judges to look for? I mean, again, as we're still trying to piece together what's going on here.
Oh my God, I wish I had 3 days to answer that question, Jesse. You know, one problem is that the judges are overwhelmed. Across the country, family court judges or judges that handle these kind of cases get 800, 900, 1,000 cases a year to resolve. And so when you're thinking about a case as a judge, you're also thinking, I got 12 more I got to get to today. It's hard to dig into the background. The other thing is we have some priorities, right? There's an echelon of priorities. Parents come first. Next would be step parents, grandparents. So grandma had custody. And then when they got to court and mom came forward and said, I want to have custody because she's the mom, the blood relative, the bio mom, she trumped grandma, even though grandma had been the main person in the child's life. And the court awarded mom custody because that's the general thing to do. That's the general hierarchy. Digging a little deeper, spending a little more time on it, sunlight is the best disinfectant. There was not enough sunlight shed on this case and on this situation.
How do schools, medical providers, neighbors, are there ways to better spot signs of abuse, signs of neglect in cases where a child, is maybe withdrawn from school, isolated at home? I know hindsight is 2020, but are there ways what they should be looking out for?
Yeah, and again, we're talking about layers. It's, be a good neighbor. Yes, report things if you see it. Schools have duties, they have obligations, and most importantly, they have opportunity. They see things. Counselors see things. There's a thing called a mandatory reporter. Some institutions, psychologists, for example, or schools or teachers are mandated reporters. If they're aware of abuse, they're required to report it. But then there's this pendulum of, well, if they over-report and they keep reporting parents because a child breaks their arm and they say maybe the dad did something bad to the child and then the school was wrong, then the parents might sue the child and they're being wrongly accused. So there's this balance of protecting a child versus falsely accusing somebody of this horrible thing. As far as I'm concerned, we protect children. We worry about the secondary victim second. First things first. So schools have to be more alert. Don't be afraid. If you see something, say something. It's the only way less children are going to be harmed or killed like this one.
I want to start getting into this, and I want to start with this reportedly deceiving DCF video call that was placed. The Connecticut Department of Children and Family, DCF, now says that in January of 2025, it conducted this video call with someone that the mother claimed was Jacqueline Mimi Torres-Garcia. So this is months after investigators believe Mimi had already died. And according to DCF's newly released timeline, their last prior involvement with the family had been in September of 2022. Now, this was a separate investigation into Jacqueline's younger siblings because at that time, Jacqueline and her siblings were determined to be safe, visible in the community. And then you fast forward to August of 2024, where Karla Garcia submitted notice to withdraw Jacqueline from public school, indicated the family was moving to Farmington, intended to homeschool her. School records show the withdrawal date is August 26, 2024. But then in January of 2025, DCF reopened contact due to alleged concerns involving Jacqueline's younger sibling. And during that investigation, Garcia had told DCF caseworker, and during that investigation, Garcia told DCF caseworkers that Jacqueline was being homeschooled, was temporarily out of state with a relative. And DCF says they asked to speak with Jacqueline directly, right, to make sure everything was okay. And in response, the family arranged this video call, produced a child who appeared on camera, presented as Jacqueline, and because no further concerns were flagged, DCF closed its involvement with the case in March of 2025. Randy, that is quite the allegation here, that someone was posing as that child. If that's true, have you ever heard anything like that before?
I think I've heard it all, and I'm starting to think, expect the unexpected in family law. And it's just, I've heard worse. I've heard people falsifying DNA tests to prove their child is not her own child, a mother that didn't want someone to have custody. So they've, instead of falsifying it to claim that a rich athlete is the father of their child, I've seen opposites. So I've seen a lot of that. But, you got to dig deeper. I mean, there's so many warning signs, and a lot of them seem small. The neighbors that smelled some foul odor in the building, and the child's going to be homeschooled, and the dad who's not seeing someone's got to piece it all together. The problem is we think, and hindsight's 2020, that somebody is monitoring this case, piecing together the facts, figuring out what's going on. And really, it's a bunch of paperwork that comes across the desk, and they say, let's just make a call. We'll do a video call. We'll check it out. It looks normal to me. We got worse cases where there's blood and guts and police reports and violence and recordings. Let's move on to the next case. This one didn't have the overt evidence. This was maybe something going on. All right, let's satisfy our concerns. They saw a video. Don't fault the FCS or whatever the name of it is in that state. But gosh, this is just terrible conspiracy. Alarm bells go off to me when you're taking a child and you're going to homeschool the child and you don't want the father to see the child. But again, who leaps to the conclusion that a child's been murdered? It's just no one wants to think that. No one wants to believe that.
What about the gap So DCF hadn't been involved since September of 2022. They reopened contact in January of 2025. Is that typical for child welfare cases, monitoring, things like that?
Yeah, I don't think they were monitoring the case. I think they figured it was all said and done, nothing was going on anymore, so there was no reason to stay involved. It was not a foster parent situation. This was the real mom with the child. Um, there's so many other kooky things, Jesse. Dad's paying, not dad, the dad of the new children's paying child support, but then she's having more children with that dad. If you piece all these little pieces together, in hindsight, it does look like, why wasn't somebody paying attention? But I think what happened in 2022, they looked at it, cleared her, and said there's no other need to get involved. And then when something else arose, they got back involved. I wish they'd been monitoring it the whole time.
If a parent intentionally deceives child welfare authorities, not, whether it's putting a different child on camera, whatever have you, talk about the DNA results, what are the legal consequences?
Well, there's perjury, there's all sorts of hiding evidence, or they concealing a crime. There are a lot of legal consequences, but again, they're going to pale in comparison to the actual crime if there's murder. But if you're not doing anything wrong except lying to DFCS or the Child Protective Services in your state, yes, you're going to be in trouble. You're lying to a government authority. You're going to be asked to state things under oath, so you're committing perjury. The problem, again, is those organizations are going after people who have harmed children, not people who have lied to them. They're more interested in protecting children than liars who are just lying because they're afraid they're going to be found to have done something else wrong, written a bad check, got parking violations. So people lie all the time in court, and we try to go after them, but the worst crimes are the ones we go after. So there are remedies, but it's not what the Protective Services group has time to do. They don't pursue people that lied to them. They're worried about the immediate thing on their desk. And unfortunately, there's another one on their desk and another one on their desk and another one on their desk. They've got to put out the fires before worrying about the little tinder and the other small things that might lead to a bigger fire later.
By the way, I should say DCF's involvement with Jacqueline, it actually goes back to the day that she was born. Okay, so according to a timeline that was released by DCF, they first stepped in January of 2013 when Karla Garcia was in a detention center. So Jacqueline was placed in the care of a paternal relative, quickly became her legal guardian through the Superior Court for Juvenile Matters, and DCF closed its case in August of 2013. Over the following years, DCF, they kind of remain intermittently involved from April of 2014 through June of 2016, again briefly in 2017 and 2021. The agency provided services that were related to Jacqueline's younger sibling, and during these periods, the relative guardian allowed the parents regular access to the children and Jacqueline's younger sibling. They were formally placed with the guardian in February of 2016. In 2022, Karla Garcia, Jacqueline's father, Victor Torres, they successfully petitioned to regain guardianship of both of the children. So DCF, they actually supported this move because they reviewed the family's history, they spoke with the children, they assessed the parents' ability to care for them. Their final pre-death involvement came in September of 2022, which I mentioned before, and at the time, DCF found that the children were safe, they were attending school, they were receiving medical care, they provided in-home support and housing assistance, and the case was closed in November of 2022. There was no findings of abuse or neglect. From November of 2022 to fall of 2024, DCF really had no further contact with the family. During that period, Jacqueline continued to attend school, as I said, and during that period, Jacqueline continued to attend school, received routine medical care. She wasn't homeschooled. Karla Garcia was granted sole custody in June of 2024, a court process in which, by the way, DCF played no role. But Randy, is that a typical back and forth like you see? I mean, it seems to me the goal of the state is to have reunification with the biological parents.
Yes, I mean, it seems like they did their job, right? It's hard to say that when you see what the consequences are. I mean, maybe there should be random check-ins. Maybe there should have been a plan. Like we have reunification plans when a parent hasn't seen a child for a while and they've got to jump through some hoops. In this case, I just keep thinking, how much smoke do you need before you're convinced there's a fire? There's so much going on that, can you have a tentative or conditional assignment of custody? We don't do that. Someone gets custody of their child, we leave them alone. If the court decides they should have custody, like in this case, then we presume the court did right and we let them have custody until they screw up and we learn of it. But in this case, when Child Protective Services was involved, maybe there should be some annual check-in, sort of like a probation period. Maybe that's something the court could have ordered. Hindsight again is 2020, but from the Protective Services group's perspective, They did what they were supposed to do.
There was nothing. There was nothing more for them to do. There's nothing
Nothing
more
on their
that they could
radar.
challenge it. There's nothing more to challenge custody.
Right. No, I don't think there was.
There's something else I want to talk about that just developed. These newly unsealed search warrants, because they're shedding light on the alleged chilling abuse that led up to Jacqueline's death. Okay, so investigators say that Karla Garcia admitted to police that she stopped feeding her daughter in the weeks before she died. That is a horrifying confession, and it confirms months of neglect and abuse, if true. According to the warrants reviewed by the Stamford advocate, Garcia and Anita restrained Jacqueline using zip ties. They did this whenever she, quote, acted badly. Garcia's sister, Jacqueline, told detectives that she had witnessed the abuse firsthand, even telling authorities she, quote, knew the girl was going to die. She described seeing this little girl tied up, confined to a corner, forced to lie on pee pads on the floor, so she wasn't able to move freely or escape this abuse. And the documents also reveal a strange and disturbing detail that Garcia reportedly began taking notes for a podcast that she planned to record about what happened to her daughter. Now, Randy, Garcia's sister, reportedly witnessed this abuse, claimed she knew the child was going to die. She's facing her own kind of legal consequences here. What do you take away from these new allegations?
Well, shame on her for not doing more, right? We're all, we don't just get along in society and just live independently. We have a duty to do good for others, especially for family, especially for children. Yeah, she's going to face some consequences as well. If she was aware of it, didn't report it, didn't help that child, and she's going to face consequences maybe in the afterlife. Who knows what kind of consequences she's going to face. But, it's just crazy that nobody else knew this, and nobody else saw this. I understand the neighbors, maybe it was post-mortem that they smelled the smells of the deceased body. But, how can we fix these things? And I think it's just shedding sunlight on it. There are situations like this. If you're watching this, it could be your neighbor. It could be someone across the street. It's not confined to poor people or rich people or people of a certain culture. Just, these things happen.
Right.
It's unfortunate. It's horrible. Let's not let another one happen. But yes, those allegations, I cannot believe it didn't come to light before she was killed.
Is it evidence of premeditation? Is it evidence of consciousness of guilt? If this is, you stop feeding the girl who succumbs, what do you take away from that?
Premeditation, it's a whole pattern, it's similar conduct. I think it's murder, and it just shows it's sort of an aggravating circumstance, especially because the victim was a minor. It's going to heighten the charge. It's going to make it a more serious case than it's simple murder, if there is such a thing. But yeah, all those factors go into it. And of course, when you're in front of a jury, the less the jury likes you, the harder it is to get any kind of relief. So this lady is not going to do well in front of a jury. I cannot imagine that she's not going to plead out at the last second, but she may have no choice. The state may say, we're not accepting a plea. We want you to be tried. We want the maximum consequence.
What about this podcast? That was weird.
Yeah, it doesn't rise to the level of a mental insanity defense because she was coordinating and it was a pattern, and she was not constantly insane the whole time. This wasn't a momentary act, but yeah, it just makes her very, very unlikable, to put it nicely.
I want to ask your opinion about this. So court records, they reveal that her mother, Karla Garcia, and father, Victor Torres, who we've been mentioning, had been engaged in intermittent custody disputes for years. And even after Jacqueline was initially placed with a paternal relative at birth in 2013, family records reviewed by NBC Connecticut reveal that for most of her life, Jacqueline lived with her paternal grandmother, Patricia Delgado, after her mother, Karla Garcia, was unable to care for her at birth. 2016, Delgado sued Garcia for child support, and that highlighted the early tensions over this girl's care. She told NBC Connecticut, quote, DCF took her away from me. I felt they forced me to hand over the girl, and I went to court, and they told me that the grandmother no longer had any rights to take or even see the child. And Delgado also said that after Garcia regained custody, she restricted family access, refusing to let relatives see or speak with this little girl. And in addition to disputes with her grandmother, Garcia also faced conflicts with Jacqueline's father, Victor. In 2023, Torres took Garcia to court, alleging that she wasn't honoring their joint custody arrangement. He wrote, I want to see my children weekend like agreed when given joint custody, or any day for that matter. Now, Randy, you're seeing these disputes. Is it true that a grandparent really doesn't have rights as we might think?
Welcome to my world. I'm going to meet with somebody later today about a grandparents' rights case. Like I was saying earlier, parents, natural parents, have the first, right to raise their children. And, if you ask me, I'd say if you look at it neutrally, grandparents are probably better to raise children than parents in some situations, right? They're older, wiser, usually wealthier, have more life experience. But we give natural parents the right to raise their children unless they really screw up and they're found to be unfit. And maybe the right situation would have been to leave her with her grandmother. This, and again, this is going to sound terrible, but grandma was obviously angry at mom for the way she treated the daughter, and she sued her for child support and got child support. And that, all this bubbled up, and eventually mom got her act together to some degree and fought back and sued for custody. And then when she got custody, she was so angry, she said, I'm not going to let you visit. I'm going to sue for sole custody. So human emotions are so important in family law. The best thing to do is do everything you can to make peace with the other relatives, with the mother of the child. But yes, unfortunately, the court either didn't dig deep enough or didn't have enough evidence to say, despite the fact that you're the natural mom, this child has now become acclimated to grandma, has been raised well by grandma, and we're going to leave grandma in the picture. We're going to give grandma some visitation rights. I mean, there's always this back and forth. Does a mom have the right to say this child doesn't get to visit grandma or grandpa? Right now, in most states, the law is yes, absent some extreme circumstances, mental illness, or something really bizarre. And then you can imagine, Jesse, when a court says to a mom or a dad, you're going to have to let your in-laws have time. Well, that's a piece of paper. It doesn't sit very well with most parents to be ordered to do something. If we try always to do that out of court, mediate it, find peace, find whether it's money or improving the life or finding a nice environment where they can all be together that's peaceful, and even mom benefits because they all take a family trip to somewhere mom wanted to go. I mean, you got to think outside the box in these situations because the law is pretty clear. Natural parents have the right to raise their children, and grandparents shouldn't interfere. They should just say, please, may I see my grandchildren? That's the default. In this case, the default didn't work.
One more thing that I want to talk about with you before we go, because what happened to Jacqueline isn't just breaking hearts across Connecticut, it is also sparking calls for change. According to the Connecticut Post, a Bridgeport father named Los Fidel has launched an online petition calling for what he has dubbed Mimi's Law. So this proposed legislation would tighten the oversight of homeschooled children to ensure that, as Fidel puts it, no child disappears unnoticed again. And Fidel wrote that the system failed Jacqueline because no one outside her home was regularly checking on her well-being. His petition, which has had more than 12,000 signatures as of the time of this recording, it calls for a sweeping set of reforms, mandatory in-person welfare checks for homeschooled children, and accountability requirements for DCF, especially when repeated reports go uninvestigated, body cameras for child welfare caseworkers, restrictions on where convicted child abusers can live, noting that Jacqueline's aunt, Jacqueline Garcia, who's now charged with child cruelty, had a prior conviction for risk of injury to a minor. And regarding that aunt, by the way, we're now learning more about that prior case. According to NBC Connecticut, Garcia was arrested in 2023 after bringing her 11-month-old daughter to Connecticut Children's Hospital, reporting an issue with the baby's leg. An investigator said the child was found with multiple bruises and fractures at different stages of healing. An arrest warrant that was reviewed by the outlet revealed that Garcia had initially claimed the baby had fallen, but there was no record of any pediatrician being contacted, despite the statements to police. Court records show Garcia was convicted of risk of injury to a child, sentenced to 10 years in prison, suspended after 18 months, followed by 5 years of probation. So, Randy, what do you think of Mimi's Law? You think this is something that's that would really have legs and is important and is necessary right now?
I think it's a great idea. I think there should be a law like that in every state. Funding, right? All comes down to funding because, again, the laws are on the books. There are already good laws there. The nice thing about this push is not only that it might create legislation and better laws, but it's making people aware that these situations exist. And again, if you're working for Child Protective Services, you're going to say monthly checkups on people that we've investigated years ago. I got somebody right now who's got a police report pending that I've got to go out and visit them. How do I have time to do a monthly checkup? They're just, people don't spend time realizing how much money this stuff takes and how broad it is until Jesse shows this on his show and talks about it and gives some coverage to it. Now it's getting coverage. Mimi's Law will give it some coverage. I hope the law passes, but I hope it raises awareness and I hope it raises contributions. It needs to be funded, whether it comes from taxpayer money or contributions. If there's money there, we can do a lot. But yes, to shortly answer your question, I think it's a great idea.
Well, all three suspects, they remain behind bars. They're due back in court on November 14th, and we'll see where it goes legally. But, you talk about failures, you talk about a tragedy. This is one of those cases. Randy Kessler, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.